what I want to work on tonight, because I didn't really have anything for Container Builder specifically, was an app that mostly is self-serving for me. Just a thing to, like, when I'm bored, to recommend a game to play with me. So I'm going to build this out more later, but I want to get the basic kind of structure down on being able to have it ask a series of questions, like what platform you want to use, whether or not it's going to be portable, what genre you're looking for, and stuff like that, and have it recommend a game. And we'll just dump out a game right now. Long term, I would like to have something like this recommended from, like, your pool of games, because I know I'm not the only one that has a very large Steam library or even just shelf library that is overflowing with games that hopefully one day I will play, because otherwise I have wasted a ton of money. But so I don't have anything written for this yet, so it's going to be kind of starting from scratch and going from there. As many of you do know, if you've seen me talk about Docker before, I mostly use Docker for everything, including the entire tooling for all of the projects that I do. So with this, we'll have tooling for running the initial version of this, which we'll do a little bit in command line before we switch to actually being a web app. Composer will be something that we'll want to containerize, and our unit test will be containerized. So we are going to have all of that stuck in Docker and kind of work off of a base there. So I've got a completely blank folder. So this thing's going to be called Recommend a Game. And we're going to go ahead and start building kind of from there. So the first thing we need to do, because I want to do this from, the correct way from the outset, we'll need to get something like PHPUnit installed. The easiest way to do that is with a FAR, but you can decide exactly how you want to do it, but I'm going to do it with Composer. So the first thing we need to do is actually get Composer set up. Now, with Docker, there's a couple different ways we can do that. I'll drag a nice tab over here. If we go to Docker Hub, we can search for Composer. And there is an official Composer build. And that's pretty okay. The only thing I don't necessarily like about it is that it's not locked to whatever version of PHP I'm using. And mostly the divide is between 5 and 7. But, if you're using some packages and you're stuck on PHP 5, you either have to use a very old version of Composer or of the Composer container, or you can't use it at all. So what I usually like to do is make a base PHP container and then build Composer on top of that. So the first thing we'll actually want to do is create a Docker file. So we're going to go ahead and create a Docker folder, because I like to keep everything in there. And we're going to create a new file in here called Docker file. So there's a couple different ways you can structure your Docker files. For most PHP things, I like to use the multistage builds, because we can use them to kind of build things from the ground up. So the first thing we need is a command line PHP. So we're just going to use PHP CLI. This will grab us... that actually auto-completed a... Does this auto-complete everything? 7.3 dash. Holy crap, that's awesome. I've learned something new today. The Docker plugin in Visual Studio Code will autocomplete. Cool. Well, we're going to go 7.2 CLI. And then as we're going to call this base PHP. So for multistage builds, you can essentially have a single Docker file that covers all of the different base images that you want to build. And you can use one base image as the starting point for another. So just like when you say from and then you're pulling down a public image, you can create a custom version of your container, custom image, give it a specific name, and then you can use that name later in the build process. So we'll want to do from base PHP as Composer. And I believe I can capitalize these and still be okay. So what this will let us do is have a base PHP command line container based off 7.2 as defined by the main from. And then we're going to have a Composer container, which will have everything that base PHP has and Composer itself. So the reason we want to do this is another reason I don't really like the base Composer image. And this is because as you start to get more complex libraries put in, like Symfony, you'll run into issues where they are requiring specific extensions, which are not in the Composer image, the actual official Composer image. That means you have to do things like, -- skip platform requirements, and then you run the risk of not having the correct extensions installed, and that can cause problems later on down the road. So we want to make sure that everything kind of works out of the box. So we're going to install Composer in a second image and then base that image off of a base PHP one. So we're going to do this pretty bare bones right now. So we're just going to take the base PHP image. We're going to not really do anything at all with it. And we're going to make this Composer image. And I've already got some code here that I can steal from somewhere else, and I'll explain it all here in a second. So let me get some Dockerfile stuff here. Copy and paste. And I'm actually going to steal this header too, because I like nice fancy headers in here. Okay, so what we're going to do, and then we'll make a header up here too. PHP CLI container. Okay, so what we're going to do down here, starting on line 10 down, is we are going to update the apt cache because we're going to need to pull some stuff down. Then we're going to install zip and git because we'll need those to actually be satisfied for Composer. And then we're going to cheat a little bit. We're not going to validate any of the Composer stuff. We're just going to have it pull down the latest copy of the installer, save it as Composer setup. Then we're going to run Composer setup. We're going to stick it in bin. Then we're going to remove that setup file. Then we're going to make an SSH folder, which will come in handy later because we should be using SSH keys for Git. But for right now, we're just going to make that directory. And then we're going to make a cache and make that, world readable. It's totally fine for here. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of those lines because we won't need it. You could bake in specific SSH keys, which can help with some, especially if people are on Windows and things like that. We're going to gloss over that for right now because right now I'm just doing this for me. Now, the other thing we're going to do is set a Composer home. This tells Composer where to store all of its files. Normally, this would stick it in home directory / .composer, cache, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to move it to opt-composer to make our lives a little bit easier and have to deal with less issues if we want to run Composer as a non-root user. I'm not going to do that right now. We could switch the user, but I'm going to leave it as is, but we're just going to move that Composer home. We're going to move the work to /app just to make sure that it's not going to collide with anything else. And we're going to default the command and entry point to basically run Composer automatically. So we'll end up with a container that will run Composer and expect to run Composer commands. Now, this should get us going. Let's see. I'll look up one more thing real quick because I can never remember the syntax for this. So now we're going to build these as custom images. We'll throw this in Docker Compose later, but I want to go ahead and do this first. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to do, I believe this should work both ways. So we're going to build two custom images. So we're going to do Docker build. We're going to tag this as recommend a game Composer. And we're going to set a target of Composer in this. And I believe this is the right command. So we're going to do Docker build -- tag, give it a name. And then we are going to do -- target, which is going to tell Docker build to look for this tag, and it will build all the dependencies. And then it's going to look in the Docker folder for a Docker file. So if I did this properly, awesome. Okay, so this is going to go through and build. So step one was build base PHP, because that's where Composer comes from. There's nothing in there, so it's just basically pulling those down. This will make much more sense when we need to add extensions, because eventually we're going to want to talk to a database, so we're going to need to add those in. So we're going to go ahead and let this run. Since we confirmed that command worked fine, we're going to go ahead and start building. Just make a little script here. Let's come back here. And we're going to steal this. Whoops. Paste that in there. And then we are also going to build base PHP. And we're going to call this rag CLI. Okay, so now these two things should build our two images that eventually we'll need. We're just going to do Composer for right now. Yep, that should be okay. And I believe we are now done. Everything's successful. If I look at Docker images, we've got rag Composer, which is exactly what we wanted. So if we do Docker run rm -u uid, and then we're just going to do rag Composer, and we're going to want an interactive terminal. Awesome, it runs Composer, and we now have a Dockerized Composer. So this is fairly long to run, so we're going to simplify this down. And actually, since we're going to do that, we can make things a little bit nicer too. Let's head back to here. Actually, we're going to rename this helper.sh. So I love building bash scripts because there's just a lot of stuff that I hate and don't want to automate out. So we're going to build a little bash script here. And basically it's going to take whatever we can run this with some options and be able to do some nice things. So we're going to do a case for build Docker. And this is going to then run our 2 lines. And we'll end that there. And I believe that should be okay. let's just make sure. My Alt-Tab doesn't really want to work right. Oh, and the other thing we'll need to do, and this is because of the way UID works, export UID. If you've ever used Bash before, UID looks like a variable, but it's not actually a variable. It's a construct inside Bash. So we can't use UID directly. So we're going to have to export it, which gets it into the Bash script. Then we can use it later. So we'll use that here in a second. So now if I pop back to here, and I shouldn't be able to now do bash helper build Docker. Is not a valid identifier. Why? Is that not a valid identifier? Because that should pull through. Okay, offhand I don't know why that's working, so we'll just take that out for now. But anyway, so build Docker works. So now we want to have Composer. And this is going to run our, really wish Alt-Tab would work properly, Composer command, which was docker run rag composer. And then we're going to take whatever we pass in after the word composer and run that. So we'll have args. So now we should be able to do helper.sh, composer, and then a regular composer command, and it should pass through. So let's make helper executable. Composer required, and I believe it should just be PHPUnit, PHPUnit. And I believe it's just -dev. And, oh, because we're not mounting anything. So we need to mount the current directory in /app. And it's thinking, which means that's good. So we're going to let this run here for just a second. And there we go. So it's going to start doing its whole dependency check thing. There's a lot of dependencies. Now, I'm going a little bit roundabout way of doing this, just partially to kind of show it. Because we could always just download the FAR and just execute it in a command line. But I kind of like having PHPUnit with the application, just because, you know, it saves me from having to have binaries all over the place. I absolutely hate having binaries. So, if we look in our directory now, we got a Composer JSON, we got a Composer lock, and we have a vendor directory, which is awesome. Now, what we want to set up is, we're going to copy this. We're going to call this PHPUnit. Unit, there we go. Now, we're going to use rag CLI vendor bin PHPUnit, and then whatever arguments we pass to that. Now, one thing I don't, let's see, I think it mounts everything in var www HTML, and that's fine for what we're doing. So now if we do helper PHPUnit, vendor bin PHPUnit is not found. Why is that? So now let's find out why this doesn't want to work. So we're going to grab this. And first off, let's see where we end at. So if we ever run into issues with Docker and paths aren't working right or we're not sure, the best thing to do is just pop open a container and see what's going on. So we're going to drop into here. And here's our first problem. So the command line doesn't actually have a real working dir. It's just slash. So we're going to want to change that. So we're going to want to exit out of here. And let's come back over to here. Now we can change the working directory on here, but really I don't think that feels very clean. So we're going to come back here. We're going to change this work dir to var www. And then whatever we mount in, we'll mount our stuff in the var www, and everything should work. And so then let's change this from var www html to var www. Save that. Rebuild our containers. So now we could have moved it to slash app like we did for Composer, but you know, I think this is totally fine as well. So we'll let the Composer container rebuild. Okay. Now I should be able to run PHPUnit, and we get PHPUnit output out. Awesome. So now we have base PHPUnit, and we have Docker set up, and we're starting to get some of this stuff put in. So, yeah, so we've got a basic setup for everything that's going on now. Now we need to start kind of structuring out the application itself. So let's pop back over here. Two common folders you're going to want are source and tests. So that way we can have our unit tests set up, and we're going to start doing unit tests right off the bat and kind of figure out exactly what we want this application to do and what pieces we're going to need. So one thing we will also do is we need to start setting up a namespace. So let me look up pop back over to here. Composer PSR4, because I never remember the syntax. And let's see, it's going to be autoload PSR4, so we're just going to steal this. Paste that in there. What are you complaining about? Oh, because that's too many opening braces. Pull you back there. And we're just going to call this rag, and that'll live in source. And we'll get rid of that there. Okay, so now we have an autoload done, and we have source done. So that is good. So now we can run helper composer dump autoload. And we dump our autoload settings, so that's good there. Now, the first thing we're going to want to do is, so the basic premise of the application is we're going to ask some questions, and then we are going to output a recommendation. So from this point, we've actually kind of done most of the basic Docker stuff. This kind of basic Docker file gets you command line and gets you Composer, which are two of the main things. We'll do web here in a minute, and we'll expand this out here in a little bit. So, but first let's get some actual code in. Let's head over to Packagist. And I kind of want to do this without a framework, because I don't really think I need a whole framework. Nothing against Symfony or Laravel or anything like that, but I think I want to start out with no framework and kind of build up from there. If I decide I need a framework later, if I've properly separated my business logic from the what little framework I'll build for this, I should be able to move those things over. But first thing I want is something for a command line. And apparently CLI is a very wide search in here. Okay, so we've got CLI prompt. Let's pop open a couple of these. League climate, which actually looks like that's just output. This one's just input. I know there is Symfony console, but again, I feel like that is going to be pretty heavy for what we need. CLI tool, CLI menu. I'm just going to find a couple of these and then we'll take a look at them. Curl client, Nexmo client, none of that is what I need. A silly micro framework based on Symfony console. It's got a lot of installs, which is usually pretty good. Command greet name. Yell. Now this is nice. This gives you some little menus. I don't want to put too much effort into the command line because mostly it's just kind of getting some stuff off the ground. So this lets you use output. I take it this doesn't do any input. No, this is just output. Well, for a rough proof of concept, that's not too bad. Okay, so this is by Jordy. We can get some basic prompts. You know what? Let's try this for the input. Actually, I don't know why I popped that open because I'll just need this. So we're going to do composer, require, CLI prompt. And while that's building, what does league climate look like? Okay, so this will let us do formatting and all of that. That's not necessarily bad. So we can get errors, custom writers, tables, columns, progress bars. We can just do straight output. Inline with those, which would be helpful once we actually get this hooked up to an API. You know what? Let's do this one as well. So we'll grab that. And we'll do helper. Oops. And that'll get us our league climate put in. Okay, so the first kind of thing we're going to need is we'll build, I'm not going to build a test for asking the basic questions because really we're going to be worried about the input and output on those. So I guess let's get a new file and we'll just call this CLI.php. We're just going to use this temporarily to get some stuff going. So let's get that. And just to test out, what do we need on here? So this is going to be CLI prompt. And that's hidden prompt. What things can we do on here? We can just prompt. hidden prompt, and trim answer is going to be on that. Okay, I think this is probably okay. So the way we use that is how, because I backed out of that. Where's the readme back at? So you just prompt it with an answer. Okay, so let's add that in there. And then we are going to need leak prompt to ask a question. So we're going to get a new climate. Actually, let's add that, and then we can clean that off. Require wants dir let's get Composer in there first. Okay, so now, according to the docs, we just do climate and then output, and then we can get the prompt for the answer. So if we just want to ask a question, can I do climate inline? Let's try this. Climate inline. What platform do you want to play? And let's do, I think I saw it was just red, right? So we just do red. Answer, okay. So now for a sanity check on what we're doing, we have build Docker, we have Composer, and we have PHPUnit. The other thing we probably need to have is actually a PHP command, which we built a container for. So we're going to just call this PHP. Whoops. So we're going to do the same thing we do with PHPUnit, except we're going to call the main PHP binary, and then whatever args we want on that. So rag CLI PHP with those args. PHP and then CLI.php. PS4. Awesome. Okay, so we've now Dockerized our PHP command line. We have Dockerized our Composer run, and we have actually, yeah, kind of gotten everything going. Yeah, Composer is containerized. PHP is containerized. PHPUnit now has a shortcut for us to run at, and we've got Docker itself able to be quickly rebuilt. So that's kind of the basics of Dockerizing kind of a PHP app. The only real big difference we have is if we want to have a user interface, like a web one. So we're just doing the command line one here. We'll just need an extra container. But let's see if we can first get the some tests in here first off. So we know we can get prompts and we can get user information from here. So now we need to start thinking about application structure. Now, if we're using something like Symfony or Zen Framework or Laravel, they're going to have conventions on where you want to kind of stick stuff. For this, we get to kind of come up with what we want because we're not really using a framework. What I would like to do is kind of separate things out into their constituent parts. So let's have a new folder. We are going to call this entity. So these will be the actual things in our system. Now, along with an entity, we'll also want a repository. Now, repositories lets you push and pull entities in and out of data stores, whether they're APIs or databases or whatever. So the first thing we want to probably do is validate that we have a valid platform. So we need to have a platform entity. And then we are going to want a platform repository. Now, we're not going to worry about interfaces or any of that stuff right now because we're just starting out, and really I only have one entity on one platform. But for a platform repository, we're going to need a namespace, rag repository, and we're going to call this platform repository. Now we're going to want to find, I'm just going to skeleton this stuff out, save, and a remove. And actually, let's make these real functions. So these will be the basic kind of things, and we'll build out from there. Where equals blank. So the repository will let us find information and stuff like that. So for this first version, we are going to really just store stuff in an array. So we're just going to do data store equals, we're going to support PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. And we're going to make that protected. There we go. That should do that. So now we should be able, the idea would be we're going to pull a data store, we're going to pull something out of the data store, and that's going to be the kind of thing. Now, I'm going to start putting some code in here because PHP doesn't allow us to very easily make fake things before we've created them. There are things like mocks, and we could do that, but without kind of some basic structure, there's not a whole lot of stuff we can mock. So now for a platform, we're going to make a new file here. Rag entity and class platform. And we're just going to give this a public not a function, name. We're just going to give it a name. And we're on 5.2, so we can't do 5.7.2 doesn't have object hinting. That's not correct at all. Type hinting, PHP 7. I don't think I can do it. I think 7.3 has the object type hints. I don't remember because as a good programmer, I just look stuff up. So we're just going to we're going to leave that off for now, I guess. So this will be a string. And so now let's get our first test in here. So we're going to do a new folder, repository, and platform repository test.php. Now, I usually put my tests in a separate namespace just to avoid any sort of collisions. So we're going to call this rag test repository and class platform repository test. And this is going to extend test case, which is going to come in from PHPUnit. So now my little autocomplete thing in Visual Studio Code says, hey, there's 2 test cases. Which do we want to use? We're going to use PHPUnits. Public function, and we're just going to do a real quick sanity test. Test true. And this assert true, true. And what are you complaining about? Extends. There we go. Now, if we run helper PHPUnit, we get nothing, and that is because I'm missing a config file. That's what it is. So it doesn't know what to do. So let me grab one that I normally use. Just a second here. Actually, I'm just going to steal the one from work because I know that one works. And why can't I find PHPUnit? There it is. So now let's create a phpunit.xml.dist. And we'll clean this up here in a second. Vendor autoload, date time. We're going to call this recommend a game. I'm just going to go into source and okay. So for those of you who've never used PHPUnit before, you can specify all the options on the command line, but it also generally recommends wanting you to specify a config file, which is normally going to be phpunit.xml. For most config files for a repository, for an application, you're going to want to have default ones, and the kind of common convention is to call them whatever the file name is .dist for distribute. So here we're going to have a phpunit.xml.dist. The most important things are for the bootstrap, it's going to run this file first. For us, we just need to bootstrap Composer, so that way we get our autoloading. We're going to turn colors true, and we're going to have some things turn on that basically stop us whenever we do anything that looks remotely bad. So errors, notices, and warnings are all going to blow up in our faces in a pretty proper way. We're going to set a date time zone in case PHP itself complains. We're going to give this test suite a name called recommend a game. This doesn't have to be your namespace, but that's just what I have it. And we're going to point to our test directory. And we're going to tell it to allow anything in source. This is much more useful when you're doing like code coverage, because you don't necessarily care about code coverage in vendor supplied packages. That's not your responsibility. That's the original developer, the original package developer's problem. So with all of this, I think it should pick it up automatically. Yes, it did. So PHPUnit's going to first look for a php.xml, then it's going to look for the dist file and run. So we can just ship the dist file. That'll work for 90% of everything we want. So let's get a real test written, because this test true isn't going to work. So test find platform. And we're going to create a new repo equals platform repository. We're going to add that to our autoload, or our use cases. So now we've got platform repository. So now I should get platform equals repo find, whoops, name, because we'll want to do something like this. We just want to pass in, we just want to be able to pass in some really basic things and have it come back out. So we're going to do name PlayStation 4. Let's assert same, and we should get PlayStation 4 as platform name. So real basic unit test. We're going to find a platform with the name PlayStation 4, and we're going to make sure that the platform that's returned actually has that name. So we'll come back here, we'll run our test. It should fail, and we're going to get call to undefined function platform repository. Oh, whoops. New, there we go. Rerun that. Okay, so we failed asserting that null is identical to PlayStation 4. Now, if we want to figure out what's going wrong, we could do something like XDebug. We're still, having to write code. So let's write code to actually satisfy this. Actually, no. Let's get XDebug set up because that is useful. So by default, this PHP 7.2 container has no extensions whatsoever. And that can be annoying because extensions are really useful. So I can't do XDebug out of the box. If we pop back up to here, we run helper php-v. We'll notice we're on 7.2.10, which is fine, but there's no XDebug, so we need to install XDebug. Now, if you're using a base container like Ubuntu or CentOS or Alpine, things like that, it's going to let you install things from scratch by just pulling things from the repository. So, like, the default PHP images are built off of Debian, so you can actually find an XDebug package in Debian and pull it down. We are not using Debian stock. The PHP images actually have helper scripts that let you make it easier to install extensions. XDebug, though, isn't one of the ones that they actually do that with. So I want to actually pull that in. Now, I've already figured this out because I've had to do this a lot for doing things like with Container Builder. But we want to actually come grab this. We're going to need to install XDebug by itself through PECL, which is the normal way you would install extensions. And then the helper scripts inside the official PHP images will, you can then pick it up from there and have it installed. So we're going to come back to our Docker file. And we are going to make sure we have everything up to date. So we are going to do something similar to what we did here. We're going to run apt-get update. And then I believe we can just do this. Because I don't believe XDebug has any dependencies. I don't think. We're going to find out here in a second. So what this is going to do is this is going to update our dependencies in case we need them. Then it's going to run PECL install. It's going to pull down XDebug. It's going to build it and get it set up. And then this little Docker PHP ext enable script, which is part of the official PHP containers, is going to install it. Now, we're going to get a couple benefits here doing it with our multi-stage builds. Anything we build off base PHP will have XDebug installed, which is really useful because then, for example, if we were also doing, let's say, mbstring and zip, and we install them in here, they're also going to be available in the Composer container. Now, XDebug is not something you necessarily need in Composer, and in theory could slow it down. But whatever we do in our base PHP, we want to make sure Composer has access to. That's why we do the multi-stage builds. If we didn't do multi-stage builds, either we're stuck using the official Composer container, which doesn't have any extensions, or having a PHP command line Docker file and a Composer Docker file and having to keep those in sync, and that can be a pain. The multi-stage builds lets us get around that by having Composer based off base PHP and all of our extensions built in base PHP. So I think this should be enough to get us going. So if we run helper build Docker, we're going to find out if anything blows up. So now the apt-get update, it's gonna pull down some cache. It's gonna make our image a little bit bigger. I don't really care. And this is I can't talk. XDebug is going and making, so good. There's no extra dependencies. So the apt-get update is kind of useless, but I'll sacrifice a slight amount of hard drive space for ease of use. So if you've seen me do container builder stuff before, one thing that's kind of crappy about the way container builder builds its stuff is that it does separate out command line and HTTPD and stuff like that. So if you have XDebug in both, it actually has to compile them twice. Doing it multi-stage build, we only compile XDebug once and any future, because eventually we're going to need to talk to a database. So the things like doing PDO installations, we've only got to do once instead of twice. So, okay, so now we have that. If we run PHPV, we should get XDebug, and we've got XDebug. Awesome. Now, the way I usually set up XDebug, and now, I know exactly why my unit tests are failing, but let's pretend we don't know and we need to actually debug this. We have XDebug installed, but it's not turned on, and we don't really want it turned on because 9 times out of 10, we're not running XDebug. So the best way I've found to do this is you can pass environment variables in to turn on XDebug. So we're going to do that, and we're going to see how well we can make this work. So on the command, I've lost my helper. There it is. So in here, and we'll actually, we'll do it for PHPUnit because that's where we're going to do it for the most part. We are going to do, after our mount, -e, and let me look up the syntax, because again, most of the time I'm doing this under in Docker Compose, so I'm trying to show this the long way form. So let's look at Docker container run. Yeah, actually that should be fine. Because again, proper developer just looks everything up. There's really no reason to memorize half this stuff. -E and V. Are you actually going to show this long form? Nope. So we're going to do this the fun way and make it work. So -E. This is going to be XDebug config. And I'm going to guess it's this. Let's find out. Didn't blow up, which is good. So, a couple things we're doing on here. So, the hello corrupted code. Hopefully you can hear me. Last time I did this, I had no audio. So, here's hoping. Worst case, I've been talking to myself for an hour, and the edited video will be up. So, we've got remote host on here. And you know what? I'm paranoid. Nope, should be going to 1. So I think that's okay. Okay, awesome. You hear me. Great. I've not been talking to myself for an hour. But so we're going to do a couple things here with the environment variables. One is we're going to turn on all the XDebug stuff. We could have the Docker file, throw in some an ini file for XDebug that turns all this stuff on, but I find that that's not really super portable when it comes down to it. Plus, sometimes you just want to have a base image that doesn't have XDebug installed, and instead of having one, like a production and a dev one, it's easier just to shut XDebug off. What letters? Audio and video have been great. Awesome. Good. It's good to hear. So we're going to tell XDebug to do a couple things. First, we're going to define a remote host. This is going to tell XDebug to connect back to a remote host instead of running locally. By default, XDebug just runs and tries to connect to localhost. But we're not on localhost. The containers are segregated network-wise from us. Corrupted code is XDebug some sort of PHP debugger? Yes. It's one of the most popular debuggers for PHP. It allows step debugging, like we're going to do here in a minute, but also code completion and a whole bunch of reporting. There is another one by Joe Watkins. I believe he's the one that does it. That's a little bit more like GDB. But Derek Rethen's XDebug version, I think, is a lot nicer than that, just because it works with a lot more tooling. So I'm running on Linux, and so I have to specify my IP address. If you're on Windows or Mac, and you're using Docker for those, you can do host.docker.internal, and this will point back to your real machine. Both Windows and Mac are their versions of Docker are running inside of a virtual machine. So you don't know the IP address of that machine, and the IP of that VM is not the same thing as your actual desktop. So to make things work for them, they have this special DNS entry, which doesn't exist in Linux for some reason. So I'm going to put my desktop's IP address in there. IDE key's not really used. I mostly keep this in here because just for PHP Storm. And then we're going to turn on remote enable. This tells it to allow the connections to go back. We're going to do remote connect back, which says you're allowed to connect back to a remote machine. The reason we have to specify that is because it's really insecure. So you actually want to specify that you're allowed to connect back. And we're going to turn remote auto start on, so that way I don't have to pass any extra things. And I just basically turn on XDebug, and it's always going to try to connect back out. We're also going to do a log. In case something does blow up, we can actually go into a container and take a look and see what's going on. Don't know much of what you're saying as I'm transitioning from front-end development back to back-end development. No, so that's cool. Everybody starts out somewhere. I love PHP because it's for me, I think a really easy language to get into, especially if you're used to a C-style syntax. So if you're used to JavaScript, the syntax is going to look really close. Now, PHP is going to have some other things like objects and classes and stuff like that. And I think personally better tooling than JavaScript. But the shift should be fairly easily, just because you can kind of figure out what's going on syntax-wise. Okay. So if I've done my environment variable correctly, I should be able to turn on debugging in Visual Studio. And since that was the first time I did that, it didn't actually run. Why are you not turning on add configuration for PHP? Okay, it was slow. Okay, so we're going to turn on XDebug. And if I did this properly, if I did this properly, nothing's going to work because I don't have any breakpoints. Let's go into our tests, and we're going to do a breakpoint here. This should be pretty close to PHP Storm if you're using that, but that breakpoint there should go ahead and work if I'm lucky. No, so why doesn't that work? Did I do this? Did I do my environment variables wrong? Docker container. It's just going to bring me back to here. It is going to bring me back to here. I feel like I've screwed up the syntax or something's not working right. What's my opinion on Node.js? I hate it. I'm not trying to be controversial. I don't like the way Node.js structured, like big Node.js applications tend to be structured, and the tooling changes so quick. It's, for me, really hard to keep up. Having to decide between things like React.js, Vue.js, Angular, whichever version is the one you're supposed to use nowadays, the 700 backend frameworks for doing web stuff. Those things are evolving at such a quick rate. It's hard to actually pick something and run with it. And I know that we, at work, we do a big single-page application for our entire front end. And, Angular 1 works great for us. We were using Bower up until last year, which is not really recommended, but it worked. And transitioning to new tools is a pain, so I kind of hate it. I don't necessarily hate JavaScript and Node, the language itself. A lot of it's the ecosystem. It's really quick and easy to get into. It's not going to go anywhere, but I feel like, especially for web apps, PHP just makes things so much easier. So you've learned React.js and Vue.js. So Vue.js just has a couple nice things for Laravel. You can use Vue.js with whatever. Another application of mine, Container Builder, uses Vue.js for its front end. I have absolutely nothing to do with Laravel. Laravel's just got some pipeline stuff built in, but all the pipeline stuff you can do by hand. It's really not that big of a deal. Now, the fact they use Vue.js is fine. I kind of like it a little bit better than React. I was talking to some people at Madison PHP over the weekend, and honestly, I sometimes don't know why we don't just keep using jQuery. It works for some things. React works for some things. Vue works for some things. If you want to learn Vue.js, I think it's an awesome little component framework. I like it better than React. I think it's got way less overhead in terms of the learning curve and all that. But I mean, experiment. You will not be a bad developer by playing with a bunch of things. Don't limit yourself to one language. Don't limit yourself to one framework. I would just like JavaScript stuff to be a little bit more stable before I would want to use it a lot. Everything I want to do, I can do in PHP, so that that works for me. Let's go to our good friend Stack Overflow. Okay, looks like it's actually supposed to be an equal sign. So let's head back over here. Change that to an equal sign. Run PHPUnit. There we go. Awesome. It was an equal sign. That was a problem. Okay. Unable to open platform repository test file not found. And that's actually kind of okay. It doesn't know how to actually wrap those two things around. It doesn't know how to actually map those two things. So I'm going to, again, steal something from work. Actually, I'm going to steal two things from work. Let's go back to our debug. We're actually going to stop debugging. We're going to configure. So now the XDebug plugin for Visual Studio doesn't assume it's running in a remote space. So we're going to path map var ww to the workspace root. And we're going to ignore everything in vendor just because I don't want stuff to blow up in my face just because it's in the vendor directory. Most startups using Node.js nowadays, and as a sophomore in high school currently, the only jobs they'd be able to get at college are startups, right? Nope. The thing you have to remember is startups invariably go with, see how much trouble I want to get myself into. They're going to go with what looks to be the most sexy language out of the box, and that's not always great long term. There are plenty of PHP jobs out there. There's actually plenty of Perl jobs out there too. There's plenty of Ruby jobs out there. You also kind of have to be a little bit careful with startups. Startups are great, I think, for young people because you can deal with kind of the instability. I got a family. I've worked at startups, and I've worked at startups with PHP. I'm actually on. I don't know if I really consider my current job a startup anymore because we actually make money. But there's PHP jobs out there. There's jobs out there for every language. If you really want to make sure you always have a job, learn COBOL. There's plenty of COBOL jobs out there. Nobody wants to learn COBOL, and that's a problem because COBOL's not a sexy language. That's okay. Languages don't have to be super cool and, have to have, like 10,000 Medium articles coming out a day. You pick a language for what you want to go with. If you want to do web development, Node.js isn't bad. And just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not a viable language. PHP's been around for 20 some odd years. It's not going to go anywhere. Ruby has been around for a very long time, and Rails applications aren't going to go anywhere. Figure out what you want to program in and pick a language and kind of go with it. You'll probably be able to find a job for it. So again, there's plenty of PHP jobs out there. They may not just be at startups, but the companies that are using PHP aren't going to go away anytime soon. Okay, so we got our path mapping set. So let's go ahead and kick XDebug back up. And let's rerun our PHP unit. And we've got a breakpoint. Awesome. So now I know exactly what the problem is. So we're going to make a repository. And we're going to step over that. And we're going to run platform. Platform comes back null. And we are going to assert same. Doesn't work. Totally fine. So if we're doing this the right way. So we know platform's coming back null. We're going to go down one step. And then we'll want to step in here, find out what find is doing. Oh, there's no code. Oh, no. So we'll play that out. So we now actually have XDebug set up and working. And now we actually just need some code to satisfy our test. So with the where, what we are going to do is a couple sanity checks. So if is set where name, and actually, so this can generate an error. Array key exists. We're gonna look up key and then array. So name in where. Yeah. So this should actually always return a platform. So if array key exists name. If it doesn't, we're going to throw new run. We're just going to do this runtime exception. Unknown search key. So this is our first set of code. We're going to want to eventually test for this. But if we have where equals that, we're going to do if in array, we're going to need needle haystack. So where name in this data store, platform equals new platform, platform name equals this data store. We're going to do this kind of the long way, but where name. We could just return where name because we're checking to see if it exists, and we'll return platform. Otherwise, we're going to throw new not found exception. Could not find platform name. Okay, so runtime exception is in the stock language, so that's okay. Not found exception doesn't exist. So let's pop over to here, and we're going to call this not found exception. This will just extend exception. There we go. So we have a custom not found exception. Just for good programming practices, we may end up with multiple not found exceptions, but this is going to be one specifically for repositories. It's not going to find the entity. And our platform repository should now throw an exception when we can't find something, or when we send something that we don't understand. So, if we did this properly, and I haven't made any errors, we're going to get platform hopefully pop up. Nope, let's go back to debug. We got an exception. Why did we get undefined index PlayStation 4? Oh, I know why. Let's go ahead and we're just going to stop execution here. So I tried to pull this up by key, and that's not what I need. So key equals array search, I believe it is. Needle haystack where name data store. Key. What resources did you learn to use PHP? A lot of Google, honestly. Nowadays, you have things like phptherightway.com, which will point you in a lot of good directions. The other thing that really helped was, or would have really helped, especially in my early years, check out a local user group. There's tons of them all around the United States. There's also things like Laracasts. One of my friends is now also doing Astrocasts, which is another kind of both of those are online video learning kind of tools. And actually, recently, Nomad PHP, which is an online user group, just kind of switched its model over to being you basically pay a subscription fee and you can get access to their entire back catalog of videos. Couple of which I've done, but there's tons of videos on there for a fairly good fee, and you can watch those at your leisure. So I would highly suggest phptherightway.com, nomadphp.com, and probably Laracasts again would be another good video place to kind of start and learn. If you want to get things kind of in physical form and stuff like that, there's also phparchitect.com, which is one of the oldest magazines for PHP. They've got a lot of good resources plus a ton of good back catalog stuff. And you can get old issues and digital issues for fairly inexpensive. But otherwise, Google tends to work pretty well. There's a lot of bad information out there, but kind of as you get better as a developer, you'll kind of notice the things that they do bad. But definitely PHP the right way, Nomad PHP, and Laracasts will probably be your best resources starting out from scratch. But let's see. So if we're pulling out the key, yep. So we should be able to pull that out. And actually, we can simplify this and make that better, but we'll do this here in a second. And we got our test pass. Now, I turned off debugging, which is why it didn't pop up. So let's rerun that with debugging turned on, just so we can see it. And why didn't that? Let's close you. There we go. Must not have been in the window. Rerun. Okay, so we got new platform repository. Now if we hop in here, or go down one, then we can step in. We see we're going in here. We've got array key exists. It's in the array. And then it's going to go through. We're just going to finish the execution. And we get a passing test. So we've got Composer, containerized. We've got PHPUnit with command line, with XDebug, containerized. We've got a basic command line app, or basic command line container. And we can go on from there. Let's see. So we actually made this work fairly well. I think we can actually do this better. Because I believe we can do key, and this is going to return if successful. So this is probably if not is null key. So we'll cut out one array search, and I think that's probably okay. Let's find out. This is one of the nice things about doing test-driven development is we satisfied our test. Now we're going to make our code better. So we'll go in there, we'll hop down one. So if the array key exists, name and where, we're going to search the array. Key gets 0, which it should. It's not null, and that's going to go through. I think... No, that may be as much as we can go, because array key exists is checking that where, so that's good. Now, we've introduced some extra code here, which we didn't have at the initial outset. We have this idea that not founds should throw an exception, and we're only really supporting name as a lookup. And we can change that later on, but we're only going to allow right now name. So we should test for those things and make sure they work. Now, let's go here. Test find invalid platform throws not found exception. So we're going to search for PlayStation 2. And what should happen is when we search for PlayStation 2, we should actually get an exception be thrown. Now, I, again, don't remember what that is off the top of my head, so we're going to Google it. Googling is always the easiest thing to do. So we're going to go to documentation for PHPUnit. We're going to go to English. And exception. Writing tests. Show how to use the expect exception. There we go. Testing exceptions. So we can say this expect exception. So we're going to grab that. So now what the expect exception method does in our PHP unit is say at some point in this test we should throw this exception. So not found exception. We're going to add that to our use statements. So now when we search for PlayStation 2, we should get this extension or that exception. So now if we run it, we've got one test, one assertion. Why do we only have one test, one assertion? We should have two tests because I didn't save my file. And we blow up. So failed asserting that exception type not found is thrown. So why didn't we throw that? Let's find out. We're going to turn on that breakpoint. Because according to my tests, I should be getting a not found exception, and that's what I want to have happen. So let's run this again. We're going to pop down in here. We're going to go down one. So if array key exists name, where we have a name key, that's good. So now when... Okay, so here's our problem. I made the assumption that the key is null, but it's actually false. So let's stop there. If key doesn't absolutely equal false. So that should get us our code. This is why I love using XDebug as part of my PHP unit stuff. I can skeleton this stuff out without ever having to have like a nice little test script. So I made a bad assumption with is null. We'll correct it because XDebug told us that. We didn't have to var dump or any of that fun stuff. So let's restart our, actually, that's probably all we need. Do we just work? No. Rag repository exception not found. That's okay. We need to use an exception. There we go. So now we know that when we can't find something, we'll blow up. So what is Docker anyway? So Docker is a technology that people probably grossly overuse. Docker is a container technology, and it's one of the more popular ones. It allows you to run applications in kind of a sandbox so that they can't interact with the host system. You can totally do PHP without using any sort of Docker. I use it because I like to containerize and script out a bunch of my tooling. So that way I don't have to have anything installed on my host system. I know that when I give it to my coworker, they also don't have to install anything on their host system. Or in the case of my open source software, people can pull down those libraries and they can very quickly build an environment to do work in. So it's basically just kind of a sandboxing system. It's a lot like a virtual machine, except there's no virtualization that's going on. And you can... It's really only kind of built for one kind of process at a time. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. If you're just getting into programming, ignore Docker. Don't touch it. It's not really something you need to worry about starting out. But once you kind of understand programming a little bit and you want to get environments set up and you get used to a way you kind of want to work, Docker is something you can add to your workflow. A lot of places are using Docker for code deployment. That's awesome. That's exactly what it's designed to do. But as a beginner developer, it's not really something you need to worry about too much. Focus on the programming stuff first. Docker is language agnostic, so you just kind of pick and choose what you want to do with it from there. So we've got our exception in here now. Now if we rerun it, it shouldn't blow up. We get our assertion. That's good. Now the next thing we need to do is, if we send a bad search key, that should blow up. So let's go back to our test. And test invalid search param throws runtime exception. So now PlayStation 4, we're just going to call this console. We just want this to blow up. And we're going to change not found to runtime. Add that to our use case. And if we rerun it, we should end up with a blown up thing. Whoops, what did it? Oh, runtime exception. Let's add the correct thing there. And we don't need this. Helps if I put the right exception in there. Run it. And we get 3 tests. We get 3 tests pass. Now, ideally, regular test-driven development, you'll write a test. You'll write all the tests you can think of and then watch them all blow up. It's kind of okay to do this kind of, I think they call it spike in test. So you build some code. We started off with no code, or at least the bare minimum of code to make PHP work. Then we added enough code to satisfy our first condition, identified new things that we need to cover, and now we cover those. So that's kind of the basis for using Docker and PHP and PHPUnit and all that stuff out of the gate, which kind of covered a lot of what I wanted to get through tonight. And yeah, I think that's a good start. So if you're getting into PHP and Docker, this should be a pretty good roadmap for what you want to do. Notice we didn't have to use Docker Compose because we've only really got one container we're running at a time. What I'll do next time is actually show switching over from regular Docker stuff to Docker Compose and getting some of the stuff into a web interface. But for now, I think we've got a pretty good setup.